It's just going to show you a little bit of how I built this project here. So I'm going to play this again one more time just so you can get an idea of this. And while I'm doing this, if anyone has any questions about how I built this, either the animation or design or I don't know, any part of this, feel free to drop it in the chat. So let me play this again here. Play it one more time. So obviously very inspired by sort of COMD's colors and sort of design scheme or design language that they have on some of their existing materials. So you've already seen the sketch that I have of that, so hopefully you have an idea of how I sort of created this. But let me open up the scene file here just so I can break down some of the rendering, lighting, maybe a little bit of the animation techniques if anyone's interested in that, just so that we can see a little bit of that. And I'm just going to save some of this other stuff here just so I can save it, just because it's always good to save. So let me open up this scene file real fast here. Alright, so this is my scene inside of Cinema 4D. So I try to keep things organized inside of Cinema 4D. So upon initial, even though you saw, when that was rolled out, there's a lot of stuff in there. The main part of this is actually relatively clean. Now, I probably can't play this because it's too intensive for my scene the way I have set up, which is totally fine, and that happens sometimes. But the main idea of this, and let me do a render in my scene here. Let's see. Oh, I'm missing that HDRI image. So you can see there, I actually got a notification that it's missing one of my images. So let's see, is that image in my folder? Oh no, it's not. That makes sense why it's not there. Okay, so my image, I'm actually missing an image reference here, so that's unfortunate, but that's okay. I can still break down the actual project itself. So in this scene, I am actually using lights and an HDRI image in order to build my scene here. And what I'm gonna do real fast is I'm looking for the studio image. So I made this project in an earlier version of Cinema 4D, so it's actually looking for this image here, but because it was a different path, it doesn't know where to find it. So I'm actually going to update this right now. And now if I save this scene file, and this is the asset browser in case anyone's forgotten already. So now if I render, it should look how I originally intended it. It's going to take a second to render here. There we go. So it's a bit of a slow render. I remember this taking a little bit long to render, so we're going to let that go for now. But in terms of the way that I lit this scene, just for reference, this is sort of what it looks like over here, is I used a dome or a sky object in order to create the HDRI image for the overall image here. And that's because I did use something called global illumination to actually light it, which we will get into more and more of that as we go along, but that's just a way to globally light everything in my scene. But I also did use specific lights in order to highlight different things or to create sort of more of an atmosphere of my scene overall. So I do have those lights in my scene, and I did hide those because it's a bit messy with having all those in my scene, so that's why you didn't see them initially. In my scene, I do have multiple cameras, and let me disable some of this so I can actually move around in my scene. And let me turn off this real fast and this. Okay, so now I should be able to scrub my scene. So you can see that I do have a camera here, and Cinema 4D has something called the target camera, so you can actually target your camera to a specific point or a null in this case, and that allows you to move the camera around and still stay focused on one particular point. So that's what I use here, and then we're going to get into animation pretty soon. But I also, of course, I animated that to create my whole moving environment that I have right here. So that's sort of the main camera setup here. It's only one camera. I didn't do anything extra with that other than to actually animate it. Now my logo itself is composed of a couple different parts. At the core of it, and I'll turn off these outer shell parts. Core of it is just sort of extruded text that I brought in. So as we've been discussing, it's just extruded shape here that I brought in from Illustrator specifically. So nothing too crazy in terms of that goes. But the reason why this looks like it does, and it's all sort of molds together, as you saw when it was sort of, where's this last one here? As it sort of was molded together, is because I'm using something called Volume Builder inside of Cinema 4D, and that basically gives you the ability to combine different geometries together and blend them together to create one more or less cohesive shape. So the idea here was that I was able to sort of reveal my text in different pieces using these shape objects, and I animated these, but of course you don't actually have to animate these, but this allows you to sort of grow your text out, sort of similar to the bool function, which I think we discussed before, which allows you to connect objects together. But this is how I was able to create one sort of, cohesive growing object here. And it can be used more than just this. You could use it to make cars, you can use it to make 3D models that you're going to print, you could use it, for whatever your imagination can think of, you can use it. I just happen to use it in this case for type. And then once you have your volume builder, you can actually use your volume mesher to actually give it some actual shape and geometry. And then I'm just using different materials and textures in order to give it the particular look that I was going for. So that's sort of the basis of my type here. But at the core of it, it's just like what we've been discussing so far, which is just an extruded spline in 3D space that has some depth to it. And then after the fact, I added a whole bunch of extra stuff on top of it. So it seems more complicated in the beginning than it probably is when you really get down into it. And then even my sort of objects that I have around my shape here. So let me disable this because I notice it's going to be too much for me to render here. Even my sort of, design elements that I added to the side here, these are also just spline paths that I've created, and it's just a box. I don't know, I probably created these in Illustrator because it says shell on them, but these are just, simple shapes that I've created here that I actually used the connect object to bring them together. So you can see here I'm using the connect object this time to bring them together, and then I'm using the extrude in order to give it this actual shape. And then using a function that Cinema 4D has that I think some of you have mentioned earlier, using the cloner, I'm able to create multiple versions of this in 3D space in order to have them, move around and animate how I so choose. So again, I'm using splines with a connect object and extrude object in order to create geometry inside of my scene. And then I'm just texturing on top of it. So nothing too complicated there, but hopefully just to reiterate the process of, using simple shapes, simple objects in order to create design. And of course, this can be way more complicated, way more sort of designy. It can really be any shape that you can draw can be extruded in 3D. And this is just one of the ways of creating shapes inside of a 3D space. There are definitely other ways, and if you find that this is not intuitive to you, doesn't really jive with you, we will eventually go over other ways of making objects in 3D space that might be more conducive to your mindset. Won't be doing anything VR, but we will be discussing some other ways that other people like better than this way. So just want to make it aware that if this isn't your cup of tea, there are other ways to go about doing this, even inside of Cinema 4D. So that's how I created those objects there. And then if I turn back on my other objects, you can see that all of this is housed together here under one sort of null up here at the top. So there are different elements in here, and you can see that there are other tools that I use, such as effectors, which are something that we'll get into later on in order to animate the stuff in my scene. So hopefully some of you are interested in getting to the animation, because we will be getting into that pretty soon. But there's a lot that you can do with your scene with just basic text. For this one, you're only going to be asked for just creating your design. So unless you really want to go above and beyond, or you're interested in trying to figure out some animation, you definitely don't have to do it in this one. So don't feel compelled to do it, especially if you're not really comfortable with just getting static things working. Focus on your design, your composition, your lighting, your rendering, your lettering style, your text, and making sure that's as good as it can be. And then, you can feel free to jump to some other stuff if you're so inclined to do so. But yeah, if anyone has any questions about this, any questions about sort of the materials I might have used or the environment that I might have used, let's see if I can do a quick look of how this might look. Oh, I didn't turn on my volume builder object. And if anyone's using another render engine, that's totally cool for this assignment, if you can figure it out. So don't get stuck on using something else if you can't quite get it. Of course, feel free to email me and ask me for help if you want. But yeah, if anyone has any questions on this, let me know. I can go through it in any more specifics that you might have. I exported this out as a GIF, and that's what hopefully some of you saw in the class announcements, which I will send the follow-up for this with the links to the video and everything, because it has been recording. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense there. But yeah, so that's just a little breakdown of this project here. And oh yeah, no, so just your word has to be your 3D spline. I just chose the word COMD for this. But yeah, no, so you do have to build your own 3D spline word, but it doesn't have to look exactly like this. It could be whatever you want. Whatever sort of creative design you come up with is totally good for this one. So no, mine is just an example here. All right, cool. So just to make sure that this is up here. So again, next week, R&D Project 2, Part 2, your design. Oh, does that? No, it does not have to be as complicated as mine. It should, have at least, the word of your, choosing or whatever. But it doesn't have to have as many elements as mine has for sure. So no, that's totally cool. I get what you're going for there. When you do your studio project, you might have to have more of a composition and design, but that's for your next project or a couple weeks project. But yeah. So nope, this one, it can just be focused on your text. Just make sure it's in an interesting scene. So lights, materials, background. You can do some extra compositing. You can have a funky camera angle if you want to. but it's mainly focused on just the text. And you can take that as far as you choose. As long as it's a good design, you should do pretty well on this one. But thank you for that question there. If anyone else has any other last questions, let me know. Or, feel free to email me. But that is going to be it for today. Hopefully everyone has figured things out. I will see everyone next week.